Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. And hopefully, you guys are doing well today. And before we get started, I just want to say thank you guys for joining us. And if it's your first time, do me a favor, head over to that YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. Now, before I bring on my next guest, I would just like to say that this is for educational purposes only. Now, today's guest, she is amazing. She has an amazing story, and we're going to be talking about a very, very touchy subject. So, you guys, please, if you guys got notebooks, please get them out. If you guys have questions or comments, please put them in the comment section. Now, without further ado, my guest today is Deva Neely, and here she is. Deva, how you doing this morning?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. Now, before we get started, tell people who you are and where you're from.
Well, my name is Deva Neely, and Deva is my real name. I promise. I get asked that all the time, so I feel like I always have to say that when I introduce myself, because inevitably in a group, I always see people like, right? Like, really, is that your name? So yes, I promise that's my birth name, my given name. I am Canadian originally, but I gave up my Canadian winters and I now live on a Caribbean island. So
see, I'm jealous. I'm jealous already. We talked about this before. I was like, you know what? You just save a spot on the beach. I'm on my way. I'm on my way.
Come. And
yes.
lots of beach. So
that's okay. I'm not going in the waters because the sharks are out there. And I've been to the Caribbean before. And I got warned. I was playing with the stingrays. They was like, hey, don't let the stingray push you across the edge. The sharks kind of swim around. I was like, no, I think I'm going to get out of the water. I'm going to get back on the boat. That's what I'm going to do.
yeah. I'm with you on that. I'm fascinated. I love sharks, but I don't want to meet one.
No, and I give all kudos to those people out there that like to boot the sharks on the nose. I'm not doing that. I see what they do to cars.
Right.
I'm not going to put myself in that situation. I'm a little bit softer than a car. So, yeah, no. Now, you and I, we've had an amazing conversation.
Yes.
And I'm going to let you tell your story. You want to tell people who you were before your life changed?
Yeah, I was an educator. I was a teacher. I loved my career. I've worked with kids most of my life. I taught music and French, and I taught usually from kindergarten up to grade 8. And I was living my best life, I thought at that time. And I loved being in the classroom. I couldn't believe that I got paid to sit at a piano every day and sing and play. And I was a bit of a workaholic. And I looking back now, I realize what I was doing is I was overworking because I didn't want to face, I didn't want to face my past. And I wasn't thinking I needed to face my emotional issues. And, my life came to I was going to say a brief halt, but it wasn't brief. It came to a screeching halt the day my brother died, it's almost been 11 years, May 19th, 2013, sorry. And my life has never been the same since that day.
Now, you lost your brother to a homicide.
Suicide, actually.
To a suicide. I do apologize.
No, it's good. It's good.
Yeah. Can you tell us about the relationship you had with your brother? Was he an older sibling or younger?
He was 5 years younger than me. And, we were close growing up. We fought all the time, but we were protective of each other. And we had to be, given our circumstances and given the things that we were enduring with family stuff. And, that we took very different roads and how we dealt with that. And so my relationship with my brother was complicated because my brother turned to drugs and alcohol, and that was his coping mechanism at a very young age. And I remember clearly when he was 15, he was living in British Columbia with my dad. So he had made the choice to go and live with my dad. I was staying with my mom in Ontario. And my brother was 15 at the time, and he called me and he told me he was addicted to heroin. And I didn't know what to do at that time. I didn't know how to process that information. I didn't know how to help him. We were also on different sides of the country. And there was so much going on around that as well. Our father was a raging alcoholic, and that was the beginning of his downward spiral. And it was very hard for him to get out of that addiction for the rest of his life. That was a battle for him. And the way I described it at his funeral, it was him battling his demons. And I didn't realize what even exactly that meant saying it. It's only until I had to battle my own that I understood more. Like I wished we had the wherewithal to have those difficult conversations back then. But I think I didn't even know that what we were going through were problems, because I just thought it was normal. I thought that's what I didn't know different. Right. And I think for both of us, neither of us knew how to voice that, how to express what we were feeling, what we were experiencing. And again, we were both on very different trajectories. So he turned to drugs and alcohol. I became the overachieving people pleaser. And, so it became a very complicated relationship after that, because he would always call me in those times of spiraling, and I would always do my best to talk him out of it. And it was a lot, many years of him being in and out of treatment centers and in and out of jail. And, there was so many complications that went along with that. And it got to a point where I had to make a decision, because my brother had gotten himself so far in that I realized you can only help somebody who also wants to help themselves.
Right. Yes.
And I got called into a hospital. He got into a major car accident, and I sat in that hospital with a police officer. Nice man, had a great conversation. He seemed to know a lot about me. He jokingly said, "Your brother talks a lot when he's drunk," which is how he knew as much as he did about me. But upon my brother's release, I watched him get handcuffed and arrested. And I didn't know how to process that.
Right.
And, the police officer was taking him away, and he said, "Do you have anything to say to your sister?" And my brother turned to me and said, "I love you." And I walked away saying, I can't do that anymore. I can't.
Understood. Definitely.
And it's not that I abandoned him, that I realized I had to shift my priorities. And it wasn't that I wouldn't try to help him. It was that I also had to make sure that I was okay in it. I couldn't help him if I wasn't helping myself.
Right.
And so it just became very complicated at that point, because my brother's drug use got more involved into heavier drugs, and he ended up having a child. So his daughter became my priority at that point. Right. I needed to make sure that she was okay.
Yeah.
And so upon his death, we weren't communicating regularly. And it left me with many questions. And, you get answers to questions, which just leave you with more questions.
Very
It's that vicious cycle that
Yeah.
people endure. And so the day we found out that he died and how he died, I felt like the world moved in slow motion at that point for me.
Understood.
There was so much to process, as anyone who endures that kind of trauma. You don't know how to process it. And my first thought, or my first question to myself is, he would always call me when it got bad. Why didn't he call me this time?
Right.
And the thing is that I don't even know if he did, if there was anything I could have done. So it became a lot of, I all of a sudden I had to look inwards.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a very scary place for me.
It always is, right? Because your world just changed upside down. You've had to experience, the better part of the beginning of your life, going through traumatic experiences, right? Family, things like that, and then you lose your brother, as I always say, saying sorry for your loss is not the way to go. I always say my heart is with you, because there's so many of us out there that experience heart hurt. I don't like the term heartbreak, because you can't break your heart. You can't hurt very deeply, heart hurt. And that just carries a more in-depth definition for me,
Yeah.
But, you going inside and actually realizing that, hey, I need to do some work, right? Um, how was the process of you starting to go inside and peeling apart all of those things that you needed to heal?
I first had to try and identify what it was I was feeling. I think for the first year after his death, it was, I was numb. I was just trying to process what had happened. And my instinct, and I don't know if this is the nurturer, if this is the teacher, if this maybe all of the above, I needed to make sure everybody else was going to be okay. So I spent all my time, making phone calls, setting things up, so, because my niece was 7 years old at the time. How do you tell a 7-year-old that her dad killed himself? How do we face that? How do I make sure my mom is going to be okay? She just lost a son. How do I deal with my dad, who was a narcissist and made everything about him, and try not to have my parents kill each other during that time as well? Plus, I was at the end of a school year, and my job as a music teacher was to do the big concert at the end of the year, trying to maneuver that as well, because I didn't feel I could step away from my job at that time. So I was juggling so many things. And I think I also felt I needed to do that so that I didn't have to face it. And it was one trauma after another. And it was how my dad told me my brother died, and having to process that, because I was away that weekend. I was away for a girls' weekend. It was a long weekend, and I went to Montreal with a girlfriend of mine, and I wasn't really on speaking terms with my dad. I needed a break, and I often did throughout my entire life. I needed to step away from my dad, because it was self-preservation. And so my dad called me that morning. I ignored the phone call because I thought I'll deal with him when I get home. I don't want, like, this is my time with my friends. We were having a good weekend. And it wasn't until we were in the car driving home that I thought, oh, I should listen to his message. And he left it to me in a message.
Wow.
Hi, sweetheart, if you can find it in your heart to call me back. Your brother was killed last night. thank God I wasn't driving.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because even my friend, I remember hearing her gasp. And then I looked out the window, and it's like everything distorted in that instant. And I spent the next several hours on and off phone calls trying to find out what happened. And I didn't even listen to that message at first. It wasn't until my cousin sent me a message saying, how are you doing? I can't stop crying. And I messaged because I had an intruder in my home 2 weeks prior.
Mm.
So I was already dealing with PTSD. I was dealing, with feeling unsafe in the world because somebody broke into my condo and left a weapon at the door with the intent to harm me. And so I thought that's what she was talking about when she asked me how I was. So I said, I'm not sleeping, and, but I'm dealing it. And she's like, oh, I know we weren't close, but he was my cousin too. And I was like, wait, what? And that's when I listened to my dad's message and I'm trying, all these pieces were moving all over the place, and I'm trying to put them together. And my mom and my dad were already fighting because my mom told my dad, don't tell Deva yet. Wait till she gets home. There's nothing she can do. She's got a 6-hour drive ahead of her. And my dad, being the narcissist, wanted to beat my mom to the punch and called me right away to tell me.
Wow.
So there was just so much in that moment that I was dealing with. And then I felt this need that I had to take care of everybody else. So I'm mediating between my parents. My dad wasn't going to tell my mom where to meet the police officer because we needed to get the police report. So I had to yell at my dad to say, no, we're a family. We're doing this together. You tell me when and where, we will be there. We are all privy to this information. And then we had to sit and listen to the investigator give us their findings. And I don't think people understand that in these cases, right?
Yeah.
They think it's bad enough somebody has died by suicide. And if you weren't present or you weren't privy to what happened, there is an investigation, obviously, and they have to give you their findings.
Yeah.
And this is where, I get frustrated. I mean, there's a lot of estrangement in my family since craziness that happens, which I think many people experience in grief. Grief brings out the best in some people, and grief can bring out the worst in some people.
True.
And the people you expect to be there or who should be there for you aren't.
Yeah.
And often will re-traumatize you or come after you. And that's what it was in our case, both sides of my family. And I don't think any of them realize what we went through in the days after, and sitting in that room and having to listen to that report. And I witnessed my mom have a breakdown begging the police officer to see her son. And I witnessed that police officer tear up and say, I highly recommend you don't.
Wow. Wow. See, you said a few things right there that I would like to touch on. First, the division in the family, because I see that all the time. Actually, um, in mine, it happened, but also I was always alone anyway. But friends that I had or thought that I had walked away, and I got it for the most part, and the coming after you type thing. Unfortunately, mine was my son's mother because she was a narcissist as well, right? So I'm like, hold on, we're supposed to be on the same team here. And she turned around and made it about her, and I was like, you know what, I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you did make the decision to eventually separate yourself from everything, just to try to get your bearings. But of course, you had a lot of things compiled upon your life as well. So I definitely understand that. You know, um, the part that you mentioned that a lot of people go through, but no one ever really talks about is listening to that report, listening to the report, because now you have a couple situations, right? You got your mom and your dad both have just lost a child. That's horrible in itself. You're dealing with a narcissist that's eventually going to turn it around and make it about him.
Oh, he did.
You got family coming after you, trying to point the finger, which is that is very common as well. So now it takes me back, and I just want to ask, where was your mentality at this moment? Did you, I mean, because most of it, I mean, I know for me, I would have been like, you know what, I'm about to start throat punching people. I really am about to start throat punching people. But now, to add to that question, how's the little girl? How's your niece holding up throughout all of this? You know?
Yeah, she is a smart, amazing young woman. It's been amazing to watch her grow. It's been heartbreaking as well.
Hmm.
Um, she didn't see my brother regularly, so the relationship between her the ages of 3 and 7 are muddy for her, because there was a lot of court mandated issues with my brother and his drug addiction and things that had gone on. So for her, it was a different kind of processing. I think for her, it was realizing that person would no longer even, that's not even a possibility to see that person anymore, or to mend
Right.
those fences. And I think in a huge way, I think my brother distanced himself because he didn't want his daughter to see his downward spiral,
Hmm.
and not to forgive my brother for interrupting the relationship with his daughter, but I think in some way he was trying to save her from that. But as a result, she has dealt with anxiety. She has dealt with a lot of things as a result of that. Naturally, that was to be expected.
Right, right.
Um, but she's overcome and she's doing so well, planning out her life. She's in a relationship with, um, I was going to say kid, but he's now a young man who, he's empathetic. He understands and accepts her for who she is, and all her quirks and things about her. We love him, and his family is amazing as well. So, I'm happy to say that she's thriving and
Mhm.
she's learning about herself. She's as smart as my brother was. My brother was incredibly intelligent, and there's a lot that she takes after with
Yeah.
my brother, which is both jarring and comforting to us, because growing up she would show us things and my mom and I would look at each other, because she would do things and we would think, oh my god, that's just like Brent, but how would she know to do that, or how would she know to say things a certain way? And so it was interesting in that respect, nature nature versus nurture,
Hmm.
and just how much of my brother was in her. um and so I think that in some way also was comforting for us, that he lives on through her. So, I'm happy to report she's doing well. What I think was difficult for all of us at that time, including her mom, and her mom was not with, they were not together at that time because of my brother's drug problem,
Hmm.
and her having to make sure that my niece was protected. Um, we all struggled in the aftermath. But I think when I was taking care of everybody and I was making all the phone calls because I felt the need, I needed to take care of everybody and ignore what I was going through. I called a bereavement place and asked them, about support groups that I could give my mom, send my mom to, and how can I support my niece through this, and what can we do for her? And their answer to me was very jarring, because at 7 years old, they said, you have to sit her down and you have to tell her everything. I was like, what? How do you tell a 7-year-old that her father killed himself?
Yeah, that's a very tricky conversation. And I can
Absolutely.
yeah, but I can understand, where you're saying that can get that was very jarring. Um, I don't know. I guess I wouldn't know how to approach that. Um, I don't know. I don't know how I would approach that, because I know when I had to tell um, my son's sisters that their younger brother had just passed away, I couldn't do it. So I left it to the narcissist, because I knew that she was going to do something, right?
Yeah.
Um, but that was one thing that she was good at, although I would still maybe have taken a different approach. She was just like, hey, your brother's dead. Hold on, you just don't call nobody and just break that down to them like that. You got to at least pushing the blow a little bit. But then I look at it from the side of the person delivering it. I don't know if you could cushion the blow on that.
No, no. And what they actually said to me is, the reason you have to tell them everything is because eventually they will find out anyway.
Yeah,
And if they think or find out the story is different than what you told them, they'll grieve it all over again, because they'll
yeah,
feel
yeah.
like there was deception, or they'll feel like, and even if the intentions are good, it's still they'll have to grieve again, because it will be new information.
Hmm.
And so my sister-in-law was great in how she approached it with her, and she didn't go into detail, nor did I think she needed to. Um, but she explained it very well. And of course, we always said to my niece, we go at your pace. If you have questions, we are an open book. We will we will tell you anything you want to know.
Hmm.
And she wasn't inquisitive at first, and I think a lot of that is just processing. But eventually, she started asking questions about him, and you know, I saw what that bereavement place meant, because when my niece was 15, she was texting me saying, and she quoted something from his obituary. He died suddenly, which I think back now and I'm like, it's so funny, because we don't put suicide in those bereavement things.
Right.
And why don't we talk about it, right? And I know even on YouTube you're not allowed to say the S word, so people say unaliving, and I'm like, why are we not allowed to say it? Because that just it just feeds into the stigma.
I was going to mention that, we need to figure out how to have these conversations, to not be afraid to say the alternative to unalive, right?
Right.
Because of the simple fact of, and I think part of the stigma is there's a lot of guilt and shame that comes along with that, because I think we believe that people are pointing fingers at us, right? Like, oh, that is the sister to the kid who took his life, or
Yeah.
those are the parents. Their son took their. It's a lot of
Yeah.
um, there's a lot of there's a lot of judgment that comes along with that, or that we believe there's a lot of judgment that comes along with that. And I, you know,
Yeah.
And I
Well,
working
there
with
is, just
right.
plain and simple, there is. Like I remember, people coming to the visitation and feeling so protective of my mom when I would hear people say, "We'll pray for his soul," because
See, yeah,
where that's coming from. They're thinking religiously, it's a sin, or whatever that old mentality is. And I just wanted to throat punch them.
I'm right there with you, right? And I'm glad that you said that because those were the ones that always would come about and that laid the biggest judgment on the situations and things like that. And I just sit back and watch, and I would just always think to myself, what if that was you?
Yep.
What if that was you? How would you react to what you just did?
Yep.
And I think, part of this whole grieving process, because people judge without knowing. They like to look at the cover, but they don't want to see the pages in the book, and you just laid out so many things inside of your brother's book, right? And that's incorporated into your own life. No one knew his life,
No.
right?
No.
And no one knew what he had to do, what you guys had to deal with. And
Yep.
I can only speak from a man's perspective. When I tried to take my life, I was in a place to where I convinced myself it was the best thing to do because I was already convinced that the world was against me, right? That nothing of what I was doing was working out. And I was like, the best way I can describe it, and please let me know what you think about this. I was tired, but it was the sort of tired that I wasn't physically or mentally tired, but it was the sort of tired where, and I'm still in the quote here. If God was sitting next to me or sitting across from me, I would have looked at him and said, "I don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
You can take me out the game. I don't want to see what tomorrow looks like. I just don't want to
I don't
do it
want to
anymore."
play anymore, coach.
Right? Like throw in the towel.
Yep.
That's the best analogy. Just throw in the towel. And I can only, speculate that maybe that's where your brother was in life too, right? Because
Yeah.
not dealing with the unhealed trauma that he experienced as a young boy growing into adulthood, and that's why I got into the drugs. Because a lot of times, no one wakes up and says, "I'm going to screw my life up," right?
No.
It's usually a compilation of things. In reality, the world that we live in becomes a place where we develop trust issues. We have abandonment issues. We have trauma, PTSD, right? And so we tend to hide it. That's where that mask comes in at. It's better that you see me as an addict because then I don't have to explain to you that on the inside I've fallen apart and I'm still falling apart. I don't know who I am
Yeah.
because I've been berated so much and torn apart that this is my better option.
Yeah.
And I think coming from a place where I used to be an alcoholic, I don't call myself that anymore because I'm not. I don't drink anymore, so I'm not going to relive that. You
Yeah.
know, um, but when I did it, I needed an escape from the world. I wanted to live in a world where I wasn't angry anymore, where I wasn't afraid to let people into my life. But once I sobered up, I was like, y'all need to go.
Yeah.
So I constantly chased my life with that alcohol because it allowed me to seem somewhat normal,
Yep.
right?
You're
And no one really questioned
self-medicating.
it. Yeah, it was self-medicated, but no one questioned it, right?
Yeah.
Because I hung around with the people that drank all the time,
Yeah.
so no one's going to question it.
Yep.
So, you know, what do you think about that? What do you feel that he was trying to hide from the world in that aspect?
100%. 100%. And I see drug addiction and alcoholism very differently now,
Mm,
um, because I think we are so quick to judge when somebody turns to self-medicating, and we think it's a lapse in judgment. We think it's poor life choices. We
Right,
think
right.
it's a weakness in them. They're just weak. They have no willpower. And I think that is BS on BS with a cherry on top, because people don't wake up one day and say, hey, I love alcohol, so I'm going to keep drinking it. Yum. Right? Nobody, or maybe I shouldn't say nobody, but rarely is that ever going to be the case. Most times it's because people are running away from what's happening internally. And, I said my brother and I dealt with it very differently. His way of coping was escape. How did he escape? Drugs and alcohol. Me, how did I escape? Ooh, can't think about it. I'm going to work. I'm going to put all my efforts into working, and I'm only going to focus on work. And right. And I literally was working from 7:30 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night every day.
Mm.
And any time, like, I struggled doing anything that would force me to sit back and relax, because if I sat back and relaxed, I had to think. I didn't want to think. So I didn't turn to alcohol because I consciously did not want to become my father.
Mm.
I had dealt with my dad being an alcoholic. I had dealt with my grandmother, his mother, being an alcoholic. I did not want to go down that route. I consciously made that choice. So what did I do? I found another way to cope that was also unhealthy.
Yeah.
And so I don't look at and this is the thing is we face so much judgment from our family. Well, look at them, our family, because, Brent can't even get his life together. Brent's in and out of jail, and Brent's drinking, and Brent's doing drugs. And this is where, you were saying people see the cover, but they don't know the book. They haven't looked at the pages.
Right.
My family says all the time, oh, we know things. And I keep thinking, shit. You know shit. You know nothing. And that's actually going to be the name of my book, because they have not one clue what we went through with my brother, the
Right.
struggle, the heartache, the tears, and not at him, with him.
Mm.
It was constant, and they have no idea why, because we didn't say, oh, well, we had to go bail Brent out of jail today. Oh, we had to deal with Brent having a meltdown today, right? Like, we didn't tell them everything that was going on because we were in it. We didn't have time to pause and stop and say, hey, we thought you should know, Brent's struggling, because we were struggling too. We were trying to deal with all of it together. And
Mm.
it's funny, because not funny, haha, but funny, because after my brother's death, I, of course, went into therapy. I highly recommend it for everybody. And it wasn't until I was in therapy thinking I was dealing with my brother's death that I realized, oh no, I have a whole bunch of stuff myself I've got to deal with. Because
Right.
my psychiatrist, who was she was a trauma specialist, a PTSD specialist, I lucked out in,
Mm.
in finding her. And it was thanks to a parent at my school. Um, in my conversations with her, she kept saying things like, that's not normal, right? And I didn't know it wasn't normal.
I was going to
I
say.
didn't know how to label my dad prior to me going to therapy, right? Because when I would explain stories to her and things that had happened, and, things that happened to my brother, she's the one who kept saying, okay, that's not what a father should ever do to his child or children. What? I didn't know. right?
Yeah.
Because how would you know if that's all you'd ever dealt with?
I was going to say that because, I mean, we may look at life in the way that we live it normally, right? Because we're on the inside looking out, and that's all we've ever known. On the outside looking in, there's people going, "Oh, that's that's not the way that's supposed to be," right? Now, it takes us a while to realize that. Like you said, you had someone tell you,
Yeah.
like, no, and then now you got a name for that sort of behavior.
Yes.
I didn't know what it would look. I'm right there with you. I did not know what a narcissist was.
Yep. Me
I,
neither.
I did not, right? Um, I knew that in my situation, the person that I was with um, was very smart and very, very manipulative. And she was good too. I mean, she was real good. Like she convinced everybody that I was the bad guy.
Yep.
And on the other side, she had destroyed my world and ripped me down to the bare bone. And I was like, whoa, hey, do you not know who I am? And she did not care.
No.
She
No.
did not care that I came from a gang banging background. She didn't care that I was 3 times her size. You know,
Yep.
she was like, what you gonna do to me?
Yep.
Right? I'll just call the police on you. Oh, and I was like, okay. But it wasn't until my son was two and a half, where her daughter told me, because I kept hearing the word narcissist before, right? Now, and I'm going, narcissist, what in the world is that? And I looked it up. And Deva, when I tell you, I saw a picture of my son's mother sitting next to the word, and I was like, oh, I knew it.
It's like a
I
light bulb.
Yeah, I was like, oh. And then I started doing some research. And I started thinking to myself, I have to start to counteract her, because if not, I'm going to go crazy, and I'm going to do something really bad to her because she's not letting up. But then I thought about it. I was like, you know what? The best way to combat a narcissist is not to
Is to remove.
remove
Remove
yourself from
yourself.
the situation, right? And
Yeah.
I used to always tell her, you know what? Um, it's your world. Who am I to tell you that you're right or wrong? In your world, I'm the worst thing ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
I said, you could be right.
Yeah.
That's your reality,
Yeah, I
right?
say that now because my whole family is full of narcissists. It's funny, like you say, you didn't even know what it is, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I was like, oh, I was like, oh, you're a narcissist, and you're a narcissist. You're all narcissists.
See, I love that. She said, you all are narcissists around here.
Right? And well,
I
that's what I
love
was
it.
discovering, and I was like, oh my god, no wonder I didn't see it because I was surrounded by them. And once I started to understand the narcissist and
Yeah,
realize that I could never win, that's when I started removing myself. Right?
yeah.
That's where that self-preservation came. And I severed ties with my father, which caused a whole rift on that side of my family. But it's not the first time I've done that. I just didn't know how to label it before. There were
Mhm.
many times throughout my relationship with my dad where I needed a break and I pulled back and I stopped communication with him. My aunts and uncles know this. They know what he's like, right? And but then they came after me. And then my mom's side of the family came after me. I think everybody was dealing with guilt because of their lack of involvement with my brother. And there was so much crap that went down around that time of my brother's death. They came at me hard, hard. Um, they wrote me this vile letter saying the most horrible things, and they came at me. And this is when I did have a full breakdown. Um, and in realizing how many narcissists I was dealing with, it's no wonder my brother and I struggled,
Mm.
right? Because it wasn't just our father, it was our extended family as well. And they reared their ugly heads after my brother's death. The judgment, the pointing fingers, we know things. But what I realized, and you said it too, you realize there's no winning,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't matter what you do, you're never going to win. And this is now what I say. They have chosen, decided that I am the villain in their story, and there is nothing I can do or say that will change that. And there is nothing that anybody else, because many people have tried to say to them, do you realize what you did and how messed up that is? What you did to her? They won't hear it. It doesn't matter who tells them, they're the only ones
Yeah.
who agree with it and carry on this narrative. And you don't realize how bad it is because once you're removed, the freedom you get in that, right?
Yeah.
And there's one thing my mom and I said, it was actually a gift. Them cutting us off and them doing those things. I mean, at first, for 7 years, I struggled with suicidal ideation. And, I totally get, for me, it was, I wanted to disappear. It's not that I wanted to die. I wanted the world to swallow me up and I wanted the pain to stop,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Because my struggle was deep.
Yes.
But now on the other side of that, I see the gift that they gave us. They gave us the gift of healing and getting out of the toxic circles that were just perpetuating themselves. That's what's happening. They're in this cycle of toxicity. And it reared its head again. I lost my grandmother a few weeks ago. And so many complications even with that, but we had reestablished a relationship with her 6 months before she died, and they don't want to accept it. And there's lots of complications even within that. But not even 4 hours after she died, they came at me on social media. And I
Wow.
thought, it's been almost 10 years since everything went down with them.
Right.
And they still haven't let that go. They're still angry. They still hate me, and I am still the villain in their story, even though I haven't been a part of their lives in almost 10 years. And they came at me hard. And if I wasn't in a place of healing, and it has affected me emotionally. But if I hadn't done all the work I did to get through that and
Mhm.
to get to a place of healing, it would have destroyed me all over again.
Well, yeah. The one thing that I came up with this analogy, and now I hear people saying it all the time, although it was just a thought for me. It was like, dealing with certain people, narcissists of the world, it's like playing chess with checker players. The games doesn't match,
Yes.
right? You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? And when you realize that, and I love that you said that once you removed yourself, you became the villain in their stories. Look, I've been a villain in so many people's stories that I just got to a point to where I just stopped. I I won't correct people anymore.
Right.
I won't argue my side, right?
Yeah.
Because for one, here's the way I look at it, and this comes in a part of that healing journey, right?
Yeah.
I just stopped caring about what people thought.
Yeah.
I stopped caring about what people felt about me or anything like that. It doesn't bother me. It's not me. I don't care, right? I've just gotten to a point to where I just went, believe, hey, if that's the side of the story that you want to believe, you go ahead and believe it, right? Because there may be some truth to it. And I often tell there may be some truth to it. So if there's some truth to it, you might want to watch me. You,
Yeah.
you might just want to watch me, right? I just stopped correcting them.
Yeah.
And the healing, that healing journey, that's the part right there that people don't understand. This is where the attitude comes from. I don't have time for distractions or people that are not good for me. I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
If you're not good for me, I will walk away from you.
Yes.
If I know that you have the capability of doing damage and undoing the things that I've worked so hard to build my peace, I'm going to get rid of you. Nowadays, my peace is important. I don't look for other people to give it to me. I'm pretty sure you're the same way. We don't look for other people to give it to us, right?
Yeah.
We develop our own peace. We realize that just because you're blood doesn't mean you're family.
Oh, yes. And I hate the saying blood is thicker than water because I don't care if you're blood related or not. If you're an asshole, you're an asshole.
Yeah, yeah,
Plain and simple. Um,
yeah.
and if you think I'm that asshole, I what you think of me is none of my business.
Exactly. Right. I'll be your huckleberry. I'll
Yeah,
be the bad guy in your story, but make sure you tell people the whole thing though, right?
exactly.
If you choose not to, that's fine.
Yeah,
It's your story, it's your world, it's your perception, is your reality. Who am I to tell you anything different? But I will tell you this: I am not going to waste no time. Uh, I'm not even going to give it a second thought. I'm
right.
not. I am going to look at it and go, hmm, I'm going over here, and I will remove my little happy ass and go on somewhere else and do what Tony does best, right? Which
Yeah,
is I'm good over here. I'm good over here. You do you, I do me.
yeah,
Now, I love all my family and my friends to death. You know, I want to say to everyone who's tuning in on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitch, and Twitter, and YouTube. LinkedIn, yeah, I did mention all those. Thank you guys for tuning in. And if you guys are enjoying the conversation or have any questions or comments, please put them in the comment section. We'll get to them as we go. But you know, I realized that life is too precious
yeah,
to waste it trying to prove to other people that I'm not the bad guy,
yeah.
right? And
Yep.
I think you feel the same. I'm not going to waste the time to tell you I'm a bad guy. I tell them like this: you might want to believe them if that's what you want, you know. Or you got nothing to say? No,
Yeah.
because for one, you listen to that side of the story without even coming to me first. So you
Yeah.
came at me differently, right? You came at me with that judgment, like, oh, I'm gonna tell you because I heard from such and such that you was. By all means, do it. But I will tell you this: when I walk away from you, I don't want to hear nothing else. You know, because as soon as I see you trying to do it, I've walked away from people and made conversation. Like, I'm going
Yep.
over here. Where you going? Don't turn your back. I ain't got time for all that.
Yeah.
Because one, you messing with my peace right now, and I'm sorry. That's more important than this over here. You know, you do you,
Yep.
right? You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Y'all go back and finish having the conversation because for one, I'm gonna tell you a little secret. I already won because now I live rent free inside of your head, and you have no space inside of mine.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
got way
That's
too much
exactly
stuff
it.
going on up here.
That's exactly it. When I reestablished my relationship with my grandmother, and she every time I saw her, talked to her, she apologized and apologized for what they did. And she said to me, she goes, "Can you ever forgive me?" And I said, "Nona, I forgave you a long time ago."
Mm-hmm.
What I didn't say is I forgave them all for me. I needed that peace of mind for
Yeah,
myself.
exactly.
I came to the realization that hurt people,
Mm,
and they're hurting, but they're not doing anything to change it.
right.
they're not willing to look inward. And this is where now I say my brother's death saved my life.
It
He
makes it. It
forced me
makes it. Yeah.
to look inward. He forced me because otherwise I could have ended up the same way he did.
Yeah. And see,
Anyway,
you're the second
but
person that is actually. I had a lady on yesterday, phenomenal woman, um, and she talked about the loss of her son and how her son's death was beautiful and how it changed her life. And when she lost her daughter to a homicide, although no one was ever convicted, how she just transformed herself, right? And when you said that, it reminded, that just reminds me right there that, even in our tragic moments, there's strength that comes along with that if you want it, right?
yes.
It
Yeah.
can change your world for the better,
Yep.
or you can choose to let it change you for the worse.
Yes.
And I think that's what separates a lot of people in such traumatic situations. It's the way that we allow it to change us. Now, I have to admit, when I went through my losses, my world did change, and I did change for the worse, but not in a way that people thought. I became a hermit. Like, I had put up so many walls that if you tried to come on the outside, if you got past the chain link fence, you still had to get past the barbed wire. If you
Right.
got past the barbed wire, you still had to get past the electrical fence before you even tapped into the first wall, right?
Yeah.
I was going to make you jump through hurdles for the simple fact of I was good at keeping people away from me.
Yeah.
I not answer my phone. I have a right not to answer my phone. I have a right not to.
I still don't answer my phone.
See, me, I'm the same way, but I don't necessarily do it on purpose, right?
Yeah.
Um, a
It's
lot
a
of times,
protection thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's a
Sometimes
protection
I have to
mechanism.
work on this up here because
Yep.
my mental health is important.
Yep.
And it took me a long time to understand what mental health was because no one ever taught me these things. So I had to learn, and it wasn't until I started surrounding myself around people and they started talking about mental health and mindfulness and holding space and being present and all of these different things. And I'm a fly on the wall. I just sit back, what is this that they're talking about? And I would go and, you know, many, many a nights alone at home, I would think to myself, what is it like to hold space? And I began to develop that technique of just holding space with myself, having one on one time with myself, right? And I think a lot of times people don't understand the importance of having that one on one time with yourself because you have to learn how to love yourself in these situations. And I
Absolutely.
think that's the part that you're saying right there, like how it changed your life. You
Yeah.
learn how to love you again, a
Yeah.
different version of yourself, right? And that's a hell of a journey in itself,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. Because I tell you, there's some people that if you put them in a dark room, they would develop like a picture. Remember the old Polaroids?
Yeah.
You had to take them and put them in the dark. You couldn't put them in the light because it'd mess them up, and the picture developed, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people out there that are just that same way, but I don't think they know.
No.
I don't think they know. And it's conversations like this to where hopefully they can sit back and reflect on themselves and go, man, that just described me. Let me go and listen to what Deva was talking about.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe just maybe they can make a change because it's never too late to make a change unless you
No.
want, you know. And there's a lot of work in the healing journey, you know.
Yeah.
So
There's not an easy pass, and
no, no,
it's called a healing journey for a reason.
right.
And this is where too, and I think you'll agree with me. There's nothing linear about grief,
Oh yeah.
and there's no finality to grief either. I think people think there's a finite amount of time, and you should be over it by
Mhm.
a certain time.
Right.
And I think we need to throw that out the window because I can still get teary-eyed over my grandfather's death when I was 9 years old.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean I think about it all the time, but it means that I held such love in my heart for that person that still, all these decades later, I still can have a wave of missing him, a wave of grief of him
Yeah,
not being present in my life.
yeah,
And so grief evolves, but it never fully goes away. And so we need to stop perpetuating this idea that people need to be over it and move on. No, people need to learn a new normal. That's what needs to happen. And
right.
that can only happen step by step, and understanding that the only way out is through.
Mm. I want to add two things to that, you know, because grief isn't linear. Um, and there's no time frame on it, but there's also no blueprint for it because everybody's going to grieve differently, right?
Yep.
The blueprint that you come up with is not going to be the same as mine. And it's just a matter of figuring out your blueprint. And the way that I see this blueprint, because like you said, it's always evolving, and you have to learn how to evolve with it.
Yes.
And
Because
to the
what worked yesterday may not work tomorrow.
exactly, and that was something I had to learn too, right? And,
Yeah.
there was a time where I was listening to certain songs, and I was like, oh my god, yeah. And then I would hear it the next day, like, no,
Yes. Yeah.
no. And I think as time goes on, when we get those little waves of that grief and we have that memory of that individual pop up, I think we're just remembering the memories that we have on certain days. I think our body's in tune with those days,
Yeah.
right? You know, and you can be doing something. You can be walking, and all of a sudden you see a tree and you go, man, I remember when I was with such and such, you know, we was with a tree similar to this. It don't have to be the same tree; it can be something similar, or a lake, a different part of a bridge, or something. Those are little small things, and I think people need to just understand that when you're going through your grief,
Yeah.
don't let grief do you, but instead learn to sit with your grief, learn to accept it as your new normal, because it's not good. Like you said, it's not going anywhere,
Yeah.
right? But don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to say that you're afraid.
Yeah. Exactly. That's exactly it. And don't be afraid too, because I mean, I still find things will come up and I'll be, oh, well, that's new. Okay. How do we deal with that now?
Right,
Right.
right.
Because just when you think you've healed, and I say that lightly because I think it's a continual process, something will rear its head and you'll be like, oh, well, that's a new emotion, or that's a new feeling, or I haven't thought about that in years.
Hmm.
Right? Because I think as we heal, things will come up as we are ready to deal with them.
Right, right.
And so it's forever evolving. And it's like you said, like one day you could be listening to a song and think, yeah, this is it. And then the next day, no. It's the same, looking at pictures. At first, you're like, nope, nope, I can't, because I don't want to, I'll start to cry if I see them.
Hmm.
But what's wrong with crying? What's wrong with feeling that sadness? And
There you
I
go.
think we're so quick. We live in a society where we have to find that quick fix.
Hmm.
How I need to heal the pain. I need something to take the pain away. Nope. Sometimes you need to sit in the discomfort.
Yeah,
You need to sit in that place that feels horrible, because it's not going to go away until you face it.
yeah,
So look at those pictures, cry, or listen to that song, cry. Allow yourself to feel, get angry, right? You should be angry. There are things that will make you angry, and that's okay.
yeah.
We seem to think it's not, or
Well,
we
that's the way
shouldn't
we've
be
been
feeling
taught.
anger, or we shouldn't be feeling certain feelings.
Right, but that's the way that we've been taught, though, right? And that's why when I talk to people about men, I go, you have to look at what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
Men are so simple. We just don't know how to express what we're going through. Here's why I look at the collective: men, women, and children. No one ever taught us that it was okay to be angry about something. because we always got in trouble for it, right? What are you angry about?
Yeah.
You know, what's going on with you, right?
Yeah.
And everybody's quick to try to fix the situation, not understanding we don't need fixing. The
Yeah.
situation doesn't need fixing. It needs to be addressed. It needs to be set with. It needs to be taken apart, dissected, and understood. We're taught, we're not taught that human beings are equipped with these different emotions. That's what makes us uniquely who we are.
Absolutely.
Because we can, because we are rational. We do feel. And when you start to neglect those little bitty pieces apart from, and want to separate yourself from everything else, that's where we find ourselves in trouble, because we develop habits.
Yeah.
We develop habits, self-defense mechanisms.
Yeah.
Right? We tend to be more observant to red flags than the blessings, the
Yeah.
miracles. And so when we focus on that, I think Bruce Lee said it best. He pointed to the sky and said, "If you focus on my finger, you'll miss all of this heavenly glory."
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, if a person can take that and dissect it, if you point the finger at yourself and you focus on the point of my finger, you're going to miss everything else that makes you who you are, uniquely
Yeah.
who you are, the beautiful person, the beautiful human being. And you're going to miss out on having the most exquisite human experience in this world.
Yeah.
And most importantly, you're going to miss out on the opportunity to become the best version of yourself as you begin to navigate your new norm.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, and it's I think we need to have more conversations around it. I think we need to address those issues. I think they're not really issues. We need to address us as a human race.
Yes.
And start to build community, bigger and better communities, right?
Yeah.
Of understanding and empathy and compassion.
Yes.
And learn how to, learn how to be in Diva space, right? With her, not as someone who's trying to fix, but as a visitor. And
Yes.
often go, you know what? I know you may not know what you need at this moment, but I'm gonna go. I see that you got some stuff on the stove. I'm gonna go in here and take care of this for you. You sit down,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna take care of you, and not you trying to take care of me, because I think that's where we make our mistake too. And I think you learn that, like, we
Yeah.
become nurturers. We want to fix. We want to make sure everybody else is okay.
We fix it. We want to fix.
Yeah, we want to make sure that they're okay. And then we neglect ourselves.
Yes.
It's such a beautiful thing. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
think we focus so much on the fixing, where sometimes you just need to sit there with me, right? Or you just need to be present. I don't need you to fix it. I need to feel this. I need to go through this.
Right.
But
Yeah,
it's innate in us. We want to take away somebody's pain. We want to make them feel better. But here's the thing is we can't take on that responsibility. That's not ours to carry. And there was a woman in particular, a woman I worked with, and I don't even think she realizes the impact she made on me in that time of my brother's death. And it wasn't anything overtly, big or huge, but it made such a huge positive impact on me. Every day she sent me a message. You don't have to respond to this. I'm just letting you know I'm thinking of you. I just want you to know, you're thought of. I just want you to know I'm sending you love. And there was never anything in that message that made me feel I needed to respond. I needed to do something for her to make her feel better. She was just simply letting me know I wasn't alone, that I was in her thoughts. Every day for weeks, she sent me those messages. And I don't think she realizes even now, like, that she wasn't a close friend. She was a colleague at work. But I don't think she realizes just how powerful that was for me. And I've always remembered it, and I always try to emulate that for somebody else.
Mm. I love that you said that. I really hope that people caught on to what you said. You don't have to fix it, but it's the simple things that you can do that make a person not feel as if they're obligated to respond to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And if
thought
I
that.
could impart any advice, is to check in with those people after the funeral.
Yes, that's something that needs to be normalized, right? Because everybody, the funeral, everybody's there, everybody's emotional, and this and another, but no one really sticks around
No,
after.
everybody goes off to their lives
Right, because the world
naturally.
the world keeps evolving, it keeps going around. You got to
Right.
go back to work and things like that, but it
But the
don't take much.
silence is deafening
Right, right, and
to those still left to pick up the pieces.
because that's where we find ourselves in trouble.
Yeah.
That's exactly where we found ourselves in trouble. That silence, that loneliness, you know. And to be honest, Diva, I got so used to the loneliness.
Yeah.
I got so used to being alone because I've always been alone my whole entire life. So it wasn't nothing normal, it wasn't nothing out of the norm for me, right? But this, when you're going through grief, that loss, that hurt, that loneliness takes on a different definition. Because as you said, that's when you're confronted with your demons.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of people are um, overcome by their demons, and their demons will take control of them and will convince you that the world doesn't need you anymore.
Yeah.
That and you will feel a certain pull to go. I want to just be with my loved ones. I don't want to be like this anymore. You feel that you're not normal. You
Yeah.
feel that the world has pushed you, has cast you out, has exiled you, and put you in a place where nothing exists, but everything exists at the same time.
Yeah.
And there's a sense of displacement
Yeah.
because you don't know where you fit at anymore. You watch everybody, and you don't know who's watching you because no one's coming back to say, "Hey, I know it's after the funeral, man. Let me know. Let me know." As a matter of fact, I'm stopping at the store. Let me grab you some. You know what I'm saying? You want? I'm not giving you an option, right? We need more people like that understand what that journey is like and
Yeah.
everything. Um, Neva, I wanted to thank you for being on the show today. We're going to go ahead and wrap this thing up. But I knew it was going to happen. See, every time, I told you, we was going to have a great conversation. And such a beautiful conversation. Thank you for sharing your story with us. For everyone who's been tuning in, thank you guys for tuning in. And Deva, where can people find you?
I'm all over social media. Look up Deva. You'll find me on Facebook, TikTok, Deva Neely for on Instagram, Deva underscore Neely underscore. Uh, there's not many divas out there, so you'll find me.
That's very true. That's very true. And I do have her information in the contact list. Um, and you guys will see a lot more of her. We're going to talk about a lot more stuff as we go on because she got to tell me how she got out to the Caribbean as well. So because I want to go to the islands, man, and enjoy that life. But for everyone, I want to say thank you for tuning in for this episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. You guys will be seeing more of Deva, and we have many more guests that are going to be coming. So you guys tune in for that as well. And if you made it to the end of this conversation and you enjoyed it, please do me a favor. Go to my YouTube channel. It's the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification. And if you know anyone that can benefit from the conversations that we have, please share this with them. This helps us get the content out there. And most importantly, it helps us normalize the talk around death, dying, and grief because more of this needs to happen. Now, Deva, again, thank you for being on the show today. Thank you for being
Thank
such
you.
an awesome guest. And we will be doing this again. And until next time, you guys keep your head up and just remember grief. There's no blueprint to your grief, and it's yours. So do grief the way that you need to do grief, and not the way that anybody tells you need to do grief. And we love you. See you in the next one.